Hello, everybody. I am Rick DiClemente, and welcome to Astrology Unplugged. We'll be getting to my guests tonight here in a moment, but I wanted to let you know a few things first. First of all, I wanted to thank people who've donated, and I appreciate that towards the cost of us using Zoom. And I really appreciate your donations and let you know that if you care to even make a small donation, you can go to starself.com. There's a donate button to help us to finance this visual aid that we have every week. A lot happening, as you might know, with the new moon yesterday in Pisces, next to Mercury retrograde, all in Pisces, very spiritual turning point today, and letting you know other things that are coming on the 28th, I'm having back a repeat customer. Dr. Ted Spickler is going to be back with us. He is a retired physicist. He's been on the show as a quantum physicist. He's going to be talking about climate change. He's very much involved in fighting it and doing what he can to help turn things around. Very fascinating subject. We're going to look at that on March 28th, followed by another repeat guest on March the 12th, who will be Kathy Pagano. And I worked with her last night with Dream. I worked with her today with Dream interpretation. She's going to probably talk some about that. Matter of fact, I want to have her on some night about just taking care of your dreams. She is a Jungian. She graduated from the Jungian Institute in Switzerland, and she is a fine astrologer, as is Stephen. And she's going to be talking about the women's movement. This will be our third or fourth show. So don't anybody call my show sexist, because we've been trying to promote women for years now. And she will be talking about the women's movement, the Me Too movement, how we are at this stage in time. And Kathy's been writing feminist newsletters for at least 15 years. So she's been way out in front of this whole thing. So she'll be fascinating. Tonight, our guest is a wonderful Stephen Poplin out of Iowa. He has been on our show twice before. You remember him as a very talented hypnotist and regressionist. But tonight, he's got up his sleeves. He wants to talk about the United States. So I'll be able to sit back and kind of do the operations of the charts. He wants to go through 4 different astrological charts of the United States and 9/11 and 2020 and different things. So we'll turn it over to you, Stephen, as we welcome you, and I will be glad to click on what you need to. Welcome aboard. How are things in Iowa?
Well, I shoveled the snow again today.
I bet the wind just goes, whoo.
Oh, my goodness. This winter just does not end.
I was at the North Iowa area community college many times, and I'd get out in that parking lot and, my God. Well, how have things been with you?
I've been pretty happy traveling here and there, and just recently got back from Southern California. Reprieve.
That ain't fair. That ain't fair.
Yeah, and 1 week from now, I'll be in Vienna, Austria.
Oh, boy, that ain't fair either.
Yay.
Where you been? What was the temperature in L.A.?
It was probably like mid-60s. Yeah, nice spring-type weather. I was in my sandals the whole week.
Well, let's change that. I know you're going to be talking about America, and right on the interesting evening when all these planets are piled up in Pisces, which would be Manafort's 12th house of imprisonment, and to find out he really didn't go to prison, he's going to go to some Boy Scout camp for less than 4 years.
Probably.
Just amazing. Anyhow, I've got the charts ready, and you should talk whatever you want to talk about tonight. Welcome aboard.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Some familiar faces, and I'm going to be talking about astrology and mentioning planets and houses and so forth. And I believe from what I've gathered in the past, that pretty much everybody here knows what's going on with astrology and the planets. I mean, raise your hands if you're saying, yeah, I can do that. I can follow along.
Most people can follow pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought, which is always a pleasure because, I've taught many classes from beginners to advanced, and it's really great to be able to have like a good discussion where everybody, can contribute and share perspectives and so forth. So anyway, I'm going to be talking about the 4th of July chart, and there's quite a few different USA charts out there. I've been using this one here for many years now, and Rick, go ahead and put that up. And you can see here, again, 4th of July, Philadelphia, and I'm using a 2:19 p.m. time. And in the 1980s, I came across an astrologer by the name of Mark Penfield, and he was using a 2:20 p.m. And I wasn't sure exactly why, but there was a Gemini rising and a Sagittarius rising and various other types of charts. And so then I took a look at this one also amongst the others. And then the more that I used this one, the more that I found that it was really quite accurate.
Let me mention to people that may not know, there are approximately 7 different United States charts because nobody knows what time the United States was born. Who wrote down John Hancock or whatever it was? What was that moment? And there are at least 7 charts that us astrologers fight over. Nobody knows for sure. I use 2 other ones, and this is totally new to me. And what happens with the different birth times is the chart pivots. And it will be very interesting to see what you got to say about the 2:19, the birth being 2:19 p.m. in the nation's capital, Philadelphia.
Yes. And so obviously that's a rectified time. And I came across 2 books that talked about the Continental Congress, the early days of the development of the country, and the record keeping that they had, during those times. And I believe it was John Adams who thought that it was going to be July 2nd that was going to be the birth chart, and he said as much. And they did come to a conclusion on the 2nd that they were going to have the Declaration of Independence, and it was being written up, as we all know, by Thomas Jefferson. And then on the 4th, they decided that, okay, we're going to have the final resolution, and they had their morning meetings, and they had a long list of different things that they had to do because it was a very busy time, and the war had already started. So, ducking bullets and all that, they were working on what the nation was going to do and to develop. Well, in the morning, I'm going to say around 10 o'clock or so, they came across an agreement with a vote that, yes, we're going to have this calculated, not really calculated, but they're going to accept the Declaration of Independence written by Thomas Jefferson, who, by the way, did not like the final version. And so then they said, okay, we all agree upon that. And then they took that document and they had it sent over to the local printer, and then had it drafted in a very professional manner. And then it was a few hours later, after 2 p.m., that they brought it out and they said, here it is. Is this what you mean? Is this the final product? And then they all voted again and say, yes, that's it. So Roger
and those Shipley have agreed on the 5:15 p.m. But anyhow, let's go with this and see what goodies are in here.
Exactly, right. So here I have a Scorpio rising chart, and that means that the ruler is going to be Pluto, and Pluto is found in the 3rd house, the 3rd house of neighbors, as well as communications, as well as all of the commerce that one would be doing here and there. I have been for many, many years identifying find what I call destiny placements or destiny planets. As you all know, each sign has 30 degrees, and I feel that any planet or a light or a node or something like that that is at the tail end, 27, 28, 29 degrees of any sign is going to be a destiny placement. That means that it's something that you have to do in your life. And it'd be very interesting. I'm sure each and every one of you are going to be looking at your own charts as well as charts of your loved ones to see exactly what you have to do, what is part of your destiny. Anyway, the only planet on this day is Pluto, 27.5 degrees. So not only is it the ruler of the chart, but it is in a destiny placement. It is retrograde, and it's in the political sign of Capricorn. It makes an opposition up in the 9th house with Mercury, and that's at 24 degrees Cancer. And so when you take a look at foreign affairs, America, and the spirit of, let's say, exporting the American dream, which shows up, by the way, also with Neptune in the 11th house, there is one could say a large propaganda machine or a PR machine from the very get-go with the ruler of the chart in the 3rd house describing who they are.
And back then they didn't know about Pluto.
They didn't know about Pluto.
Back then there was no Pluto, there was no Neptune, and there was no Uranus.
That's right. They did not know the outer planets, but there they were. What they did know, of course, is that the sun was there in Cancer, conjunct Jupiter.
Yes.
Not too far away is also Venus.
Very good, yeah.
That this country has been blessed in many ways.
Resourceful.
Also about Cancer, material focus, and the land of plenty. Mm-hmm. Lots of resources, natural goods, and so forth. But of course, there's going to be some problems, and there's a lot of problems in the history of the United States. When we take a look at the importation of slavery, as well as pretty much the march, the manifest destiny that became really kind of like described in the late 1800s, but it was there from the very beginning, even before 1776. When a lot of them just said, well, this land is our land.
Dear Indians.
Dear Indians, this land is our land. Yeah. I consider that earlier time, 10 o'clock in the morning, when they initially said, yes, this is it, we had Neptune rising and Mars on the midheaven. And they square each other. And I consider this particular square the skeleton in which everything else is kind of built upon. And on the Mars side, we also have Uranus, which again wasn't discovered until a few years later, in Gemini. And again, that's one of the signs of a duality in this nation that has always had a duality. And even our present situation here between the Democrats and the Republicans is nothing new. It's always been basically a two-party system. And there's smaller other parties, but they really never had a great voice. The duality comes up there with Mars in Gemini, as well as Uranus in Gemini, as well as, of course, Cancer is also a dual sign. Even the symbols of it, you can see like the 2 6s, moving this way, and that's a double sign. And this whole thing about taking care of home, the family, and our manifest destiny is for us to conquer this land. That's where we go more towards the Mars side, but really like having a place for everyone. And that was the idealism in Sun, Jupiter, and Mercury in the 9th house. Give us your tired, give us your poor, come to this land, the welcoming of immigrants, Jupiter again from other lands coming to this land. And then again, the duality always there. Yes, come, but not so many of you, and not particular people from certain lands, like from the Chinese, they were blocked for a long time. The Asians were blocked. There was always this sense of, on the ninth house positive side, yes, the idealism, the independence, we are all created equal, and so forth. But then always this Pluto in Capricorn, opposition Mercury, and there were lots of lawyers who were involved with with many of the ideas there that is found in the Continental Congress as well as in the Constitution and so forth. And as we probably know too, within the Constitution, slavery was built into the system from the very beginning. And so there were these compromises. Again, think of the third house, Pluto, opposition ninth house. How are we going to actually work together? And unfortunately, we have to make some unsavory backroom deals. And indeed, slavery was one of them. And so, right, still today, one can read that slaves were considered, I think it was 3/5 of a person as far as voting was concerned.
So they knew ahead of time that they knew that Saturn was squaring the sun.
Exactly. Saturn,
1 degree.
1 degree, Saturn squaring the sun, and Saturn in the 12th house in this chart, where it's kind of like, we're making a deal here, although idealistically it's in Libra, and so it's in a powerful position there, but it's in the 12th house. We're making these backroom deals.
What country does it?
In the 9th. Yeah. Then we have, always very important is the moon sign, and that is in Aquarius. And I have it here conjunct Pallas Athena. I use 3 of the asteroids from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. And I find them very useful in understanding. And it's my pet perspective that they, all 3, are the rulers of Virgo.
What did you find? Because that's one of the critical things I look for with the different USA charts. What did you find happened when Neptune was going over that moon? Was that comparative to the WMD times?
I'd have to, if that's what you've calculated. I did not calculate that yet.
I don't know. I mean, Neptune now it's up here, but it must have been around that moon area around that time. Anyhow, just something to look into.
Yeah, when it went from that time, that placement there in Virgo, and of course it takes, 164 years to go around the zodiac. And so, yeah, it would take quite a long time there to get to that moon position. But that moon is that independent, I can do it, and that technologically inclined American attitude. Let's pull up our sleeves and we can come up with a better mousetrap. And the technological innovations that have always been there. And then, of course, the Ford Model T, as well as the factory system and the technology and so forth, always innovating in this land. Of course, the moon being especially important for a Cancer country. And
that's a 4th house moon, too.
4th house moon, that's right. And this is periodically, by the way, America, when you take a look at foreign policy, has constantly gone between isolationism and interventionism. Going back and forth, again, with that duality. America for itself, it was really difficult for us to get into First World War, into the Second World War. They say it's not our war. And so there was a split in the country several times about that itself. And here is the moon in the 4th house, our house. But it's still an Aquarian perspective. It's a melting pot, always has been. So anyway, as I said, I've been using this for a long time. I've got 2 reference books that pointed towards the signing after 2 p.m. And I have the information here if you want. I've been using this, as I said, for many, many years right now. But let's take a look at a couple of different things with this chart. As I said, there was, from the very get-go, in 1776, we had that compromise that we're going to have slavery. Slavery is going to be okay. You all know how long a Uranus transit takes to go around the zodiac.
84 years.
84 years. You add 84 to 1776, 1860. What happened in 1860?
Liberation.
It was the Civil War, and it was basically at that time it had to come back. Uranus again in the 8th house of conflicts and things kind of cooking behind the scenes came back into its placement there. And this was the Civil War. Again, the duality split the nation in two, and we all know how that turned out. By the way, Uranus continued to move, of course, in the 1860s until it conjuncted Mars, also in Gemini, and that was the most fierce part of the fighting in the Civil War in 1884. Mm-hmm. You might guess then, or even be curious about, well, what happened then the second time that Uranus came back to itself? So the second Uranus return, and we were in another war, and that was in
Second World War.
Second World War, 1944.
Wow. This is all clearly demarcated in Richard Tarnas's Cosmos and Psyche, which is one tiny reason why that book is so excellent. Exactly.
Yeah, really fascinating. And I read that book also, really very useful. And this Uranus coming back to its original place, usually points towards, conflagrations, splits, really very difficult things. And one can even say that in the Second World War, even though when we were kind of united fighting the Nazi enemies, the nation was still split, even though the blacks had won the right to vote. There was still segregation, and even in the military, they had black and white troops and cadres. So it wasn't happening quite then yet. Then we have the next time that we're going to have the Uranus return, because I'm sure you're all curious about that, is going to be in 2027 and 28. That's again when Uranus will again go into that place. But it's going to be built upon a couple of other things that I'd like to share with you tonight, connected with what Pluto has been doing, because we're coming up also with a Pluto return within just a few years before the third Uranus return.
Oh my God.
It is going to be quite the 2020s, one can say. I'd have to say fasten your seatbelts. And when I was taking a look at all of this is one of the reasons why I wanted to share with you what I've been seeing with this chart. We're going to be taking a look specifically at the Pluto return. But I can tell you right now that it's going to go back here on 2022. Before we get to that point, I've got another chart that we'll take a look at connected with
what happened in this. Well, you're going to do 9/11 later. I'll wait for that.
I'm actually going to do 9/11 right now, but I also would like to say, I know that there's a chat always going on in the background, but if anybody would like to, add in or raise your hand or want to say anything about this chart or something that astrologically or historically about this, I'm always open to.
Well, I'm interested in the fact that some people say that an outer planet cannot rule a chart, and so you would have to use Mars and Gemini as the ruler of this chart. And I think that Mars and Gemini in the 8th house makes a lot of sense also. But I'm
It does.
all ears. I find it fascinating so far. I can't wait to see where the planets were in 9/11.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my feeling, and I was using this chart, of course, years before 9/11, but when 9/11 came around, and we're going to be taking a look at that chart real soon, it really pointed to me towards a destiny. It was right here in 1776, almost like the Twin Towers and the 9/11 attack was predestined. It's really quite fascinating. So go ahead and bring up that chart, Rick.
2020, Pluto. There's New York trade
Yep.
bombing.
New York World Trade bombing here. And of course, that was September 11th, 2001. And like all of these tri-wheel charts, the transits are in the outer wheel. I've got, again, right there in the middle, that is the natal chart that we've been talking about for the last bit. The middle wheel is the secondary progressions. And if people don't know about that, then basically it's a calculation in which 1 day equals 1 year in these calculations. So basically, for instance, the sun moves about 1 degree per day, and in a progression, it would be the sun would be moving 1 degree per year. And so that's a real quick description. So first of all, in this kind of complex chart, take a look at the progressed Mars in the 12th house at 18 degrees, and then take a look at the progressed ascendant up in the 9th house at 18 degrees, Cancer, 9th house, progressed ascendant. That's in the middle, there we go, that's it. Yeah. So again, progressed ascendant will move approximately, not always, but approximately 1 degree per year. And so here it is, right there, the 9/11 attack and the progressed ascendant 18 degrees squaring that Mars that has passed by Saturn, by the way, slowly. And that was, of course, the kicker, as it were, because in the 12th house, that's the house of hidden enemies. The plot thickens when we take a look at the transit of Neptune in the 3rd house, 6 degrees, and that is exactly conjunct the natal 6 degrees south node. And it was religious fanatics who attacked the country. And this is very close to a square to the midheaven. But the kicker, the pièce de résistance, is on the progressed midheaven, 0 degrees in the 5th house, 0 degrees Aries, 0.
Wow. Yeah, brand new zodiac.
Brand new zodiac in Aries. And I was talking with a friend who reminded me about, I think it was during the decision to start the Afghan war under George Bush. And I did a quick calculation and I looked at this in this very same position right here. And I told him, I had forgotten this, by the way, he just reminded me about 3 months ago. But I said, we're going to be in a war over there for 20 years. And,
wow.
I calculated that with this very 0 degrees 0, that's when that midheaven, which, as I said, that only moves 1 degree per year, and it begins the zodiac at that point.
Where did you get 20?
Oh, I got that with the most intense decanates of fire. The first, of course, is ruled by Aries. The second one is ruled by the second fire sign, which would be Leo. And so we're going to continue with
what that means. A decadent is each sign is divided into 3 pieces. So if you look at Aries, the first 10 degrees is the Aries section. Then all decadents are all fire signs. So the second decadent is the Leo decadent. The third 10 degrees is the Sagittarian part of the Aries sign.
And I was thinking that once it went into the third decanate, which is a Sagittarius decanate of Aries, that would be sparking the high-mindedness of Jupiter in the 9th house. And so then there would be more of a sense of, let's think about this. Let's come up with another solution outside of war, outside of revenge, and let's find some diplomacy instead of.
That's a very good analysis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm really actually sad to say that has come true, because we are coming up on, of course, 20 years of war now. And again, 2 wars. Again, the duality shows up so many times.
That's what all that Gemini, yeah.
Indeed, the Gemini, the Cancer. Yeah, so anyway, this I felt like one can really go into, a lot more detail about this. But that was enough to say, that cinched it for me that I've been using this chart for quite a few years. And in 2001, I said, my goodness, okay, that's it for me.
You're convinced.
I'm convinced. Yeah. Okay. Any questions, any ideas, any other perspectives about any of this?
I'm interested in knowing what happened when Uranus crossed this ascendant. Uranus is back here, just entered Taurus today for its 2nd time. So it would have been about almost 40 years ago when Uranus.
That's right. It was in the mid 70s, mid to late 70s, that Uranus went across that point. And the
unisex, all the Scorpio stuff.
Exactly. I mean, what do people remember about the 70s? Wasn't that like disco time? And wasn't there a lot of sex? And, this was after the 60s, which, by the way, shows up in a couple of other very interesting ways. But the
70s was the critical turning point when the hope that came out of the 60s started to die. And it went down when Nixon resigned.
Exactly.
Right around 75. Is when that hippie hope of it's going to be a better world, and we're fighting the man, and things are going to get good, and the spiritual movement was making great things, and Maharishi was in the United States, and all kinds of things were moving, and all of a sudden the hippie movement died. Now came the yippie, what is it, yippie? Yuppies.
The yippies.
Yuppies. The yuppies came on, and the spiritual movement seemed to die, but it went underground. Also, Pluto was in Virgo. And it was very sobering.
By the way, since we're talking about that, Rick, you may find it also interesting that, of course, the 60s was famous for the Uranus-Pluto conjunction.
Yeah, and you know what I found out today? That's when Dylan went electric. Dylan went electric at 65, and they about threw him out of the joint. And
are you still angry about that?
And he was playing in London, and they were so upset because they were used to the folk singer with his acoustic, and he went electric, and he was just so far ahead of his time. And I said that had to be 65 when Uranus and Pluto were conjunct in October, and it's exactly when it was.
Exactly.
It shows you how in touch he is with the archetypes.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And you can see also during the 60s that particular conjunction of Uranus and Pluto was on top of the U.S. Neptune. It was right there in the 11th house, Neptune.
It was right there, it was right.
First of all, Uranus conjuncting Neptune. And of course, the U.S. took it again very personally. And remember that I believe that this Neptune placement was the one of the indicators of the slavery being accepted, with that square also to Mars, that there's going to be a fight about it and a lot of tension about it. But yeah, the civil rights movement, not only the civil rights movement, but also the gay rights movement, the women's,
all the stuff by LBJ,
all kinds of things.
Medicaid, all that. It was at
Exactly.
18 degrees, but it spread its wings far both sides.
Indeed, yeah. But the exact aspects, actually, Uranus was conjunct this Uranus here in 1966, and then Pluto came to the conjunction in 67, 68. So
wow,
that it's just really quite perfect.
I remember those times, and I thought it just because I was young.
Yeah.
Nope. It was a very special time.
Very special time.
This country was really shaken up.
Oh my goodness, yeah. By the way, with the mid-90s, that was another fabulous conjunction that Uranus, Neptune, in again Capricorn. And I think when we take a look at that particular alignment, again, this is worldwide, it was the visuals of Neptune marrying or connecting with the technology of Uranus in the very pragmatic, practical Capricorn, and that was the beginning of the World Wide Web.
95, yeah.
Yeah.
Uranus had entered Sag. Pluto entered Sag.
Yeah, and those two particular planets, Uranus and Neptune, were conjunct this Pluto position of the U.S. chart in Capricorn in the mid-90s, in that third house. And of course, the U.S., was, again, leading the way with the whole technology and World Wide Web, and even the domains for a long time was totally controlled by the U.S.
Yeah, and how we communicate, third house, everything changed.
Exactly, yeah. And then from there, came the clunkers of those early portable phones, and then that led into more developments in the last 10, 15 years into Androids and iPhones and so forth. But again, all that innovation here in the third house of communication, and the U.S. again has led the way with that.
I remember Gopher Mail, and I sent a message from my business to Gopher. Was the large parts of the internet came from the University of Minnesota, so you had GopherNet before the internet. And we would send a message to Minnesota, and somebody send you one back. Wow! I was just stunned. I just got a message back from somebody.
I know, that was really amazing.
That's how innocent it was.
And then email and
email.
My goodness.
Then the lid was off.
That's it, and that was the 90s. And again, astrologically, it just really shows up in a fabulous way. Yeah, so the next chart is now going to move us into the present time. And I think that's the 2020. Those are my books, by the way. Thanks for that PR thing.
You got your own folder, so let me find my way back. Which one you want?
That's it. 2020. Go back one. Yeah, there we go.
There you are.
We're bringing it up now, up to speed into the present time. I would have you again take a look at the sixth house in this, recognizing that again the U.S. chart is in the middle, and the progressed placements here to next year, January 12th, 2020. That's when we have the exact conjunction of Saturn Pluto coming up. And there.
Where? Oh, you mean the Saturn Pluto here? Oh my God!
That's right. That's the third house.
Oh boy!
Yeah, that's why I have the chart. That's why I calculated this chart. This is coming up next January.
So you can feel Saturn now is in Capricorn, approaching
Oh my
Pluto.
goodness. Definitely. And this is more and more people are seeing that we've got a plutocracy here.
Well, this is going to be something, because this is like Holocaust type energy.
This is so strong.
Yeah.
This is really quite big. I'd like to take just a little bit step back. And when Pluto, in its present transits, went into the sign of Capricorn, that was in 2008. And what happened in 2008?
The recession.
The Great Recession, and all the excitement there when it was going through Sagittarius, and for expenditures and so forth. And then came, the government had to step in 2008. Really quite fascinating.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, we recently, of course, had this really interesting and volatile square of Uranus and Pluto. And again, we go slightly back in time when Uranus went into Aries, and that was in 2011. And as you may or may not know, in that March of 2011, that was when they had an earthquake in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
a tsunami.
The tsunami is when Neptune entered Pisces.
Exactly. It was right there at that Pisces point when Uranus was 29 degrees, at that destiny placement in Pisces. And then it went the next day, Uranus went into the sign of Aries. And that's when we had the explosion in Fukushima.
That's exactly right. It was right here.
It was so hot. It was just so exact.
Fukushima was precisely when Neptune changed to a new zodiac.
Yeah, yeah. And then Uranus going into Aries, that new zodiac, at that point, a few years already, Pluto was, slowly going through Capricorn. But at that, they were squaring each other from 2011 until about, 2016, 18.
Hold on 1 moment. I'm sorry. I just saw, I didn't see Suzanne's hand has been raised. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, I just made a note in the note area. I just thought I was alarmed by Mars being smack in the middle of the 8th house. I guess it's in Gemini, right?
Yes.
And so it's right there, and that's really problematic for me because I see that position as the possibility of the ending of the U.S. to be very violent. And then also there's something to do with the 8th house with death and things like that. It just seems to be unstable to have Mars there in Gemini.
You don't want to mess with that.
Yes, I agree, Suzanne. That is very problematic. And unfortunately, our country has been in some sort of conflict or some sort of war from the very beginning.
With everybody.
Yeah, and just one more thing about the Saturn in the 12th house intrigues me because, like you said earlier, there were things that were decided, profound things decided behind closed doors, but I see Saturn in the 12th house as almost karmic and a heavy-handed karmic type of connection.
Yes, very good insight. I'd have to agree about that. And even some sort of embarrassments, for instance, breaking away from England, with the American Revolution. And then does anyone remember when England or Great Britain then abolished the slave trade? I think it was like 1815 or 1812 or something. Anyway, it was decades before the U.S. did. Yeah. So definitely problematic. And unfortunately, when we take a look at, they say from time to time that the U.S. is a land of law and the Constitution and so forth. But it's that Saturn in the 12th house squaring the more higher idealism of the sun in the 9th house. And there's been so many compromises. It's quite embarrassing, all the different things that happened over the years that has been, let's say, legal, whether that be the treaties to the Native Americans, whether that be, the Jim Crow laws, whether that be,
little kids in cages.
Yeah, it was legal to go ahead and, capture those slaves and bring them back to their owners. I mean, all that was the law.
Yeah, including the guy tonight that gets 4 years in prison.
Right, right. Yet again, here we go again. I see that chat room. We've got like 27 sorts of things. I hate to be behind that. I'm not reading it. I can't. But
yeah.
let me now go slightly back, because even though this is a 2020 chart, so this is next January 2020. However, I wanted to have you take a look at something very interesting. You can see there that in the sixth house, we're getting to that point here, 19 degrees, 35 minutes in Aries, as I had predicted, unhappily, many years ago, that we're getting to the ends of these two wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Let us hope that indeed that's going to come to an end.
Just because the progressed midheaven has been moving through the first 20 degrees of the sign of Aries, and it's 1935 now.
Yeah.
So you're predicting that because it's going to come out of the Leo decadent and into the Sagittarian decadent of the sign of Aries.
Exactly. Yeah, I think so. But there's something that's also interesting in that very same sixth house. You can see that Venus has progressed into Taurus.
Right.
And it's having a little dance, by the way, right now with transiting Uranus.
Well, Uranus is just gone into zero today.
Yeah, today.
So Uranus is now in Taurus for the next 7 years, and it's not going to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And so it's let's hope for happy Earth days to come. In the meantime,
that's wow.
That very same 0 degrees means that in the last several years, and I have calculated from 2016 to 2020, progressed Venus has been squaring Pluto in the third house, as well as the progressed Pluto at 29. It's 27 natally, it's 29 in the progressed chart, and Venus, feminine, and the Me Too movement has been squaring Pluto in the third house, and look at all that has happened just from that square, from the progressed Venus to Pluto there since 2016, 2017. How many people have had to get ousted, as well as Bill Cosby and Weinstein, and so many other people have had to get the boot through outrageousness. Think again, Venus, females, and victims, and of course Pluto, sexual misconduct and rape and so forth.
What do you think? What do you think? This one has Uranus at 2. Uranus now at 0. So right around now, what do you think transiting Uranus is going to do to that progressed Saturn? And it's right across the ascendant. This is this is a big deal. What do you feel about this?
That fits in quite nicely to also this. The whole chart itself is about the exact Pluto-Saturn conjunction there in Capricorn, and that's why I made this particular chart, and that's coming up next January. And then at the same time, yes, Rick, there is the Uranus opposition Saturn right there too. I mean, there's so many things pointing towards right now, things are cooking in the house, and I think women are cooking in the house.
Yeah, but this is really volatile with international relationships. This shows a sudden, shocking break with people in countries that we could depend on before.
Oh, so true. And also, classically, Uranus would represent more of the liberal groups, including those liberal politicians. Saturn, especially there in the 12th house in Scorpio, it's representing the recalcitrants, the reactionaries, and the conservatives. And they are at odds in general. But look at this, coming up here to the next election in 2020. and how many people are already have come out and they're running for president. And then we've got this opposition. It's really putting up steam, and it's gotten, or has been, ugly in the past, and I think it's going to get uglier.
Well, this to me is symbolic of the civilization being very threatened. If you look at the natal Saturn, has taken 250 years to progress from here to here.
Yeah.
Gone from 14, the middle of Libra, in 250 years, or the first 250 days after the birthday in 1776. It has progressed to here, but it is retrograding. So that will slow it down greatly. But eventually, when that Saturn progresses and crosses its ascendant, that's going to be a hard thing to live through.
Mm-hmm. That might even be what
hard thing to survive through.
Looking at, the demise.
It could be the demise, yes. But that retrograde is going to go on for
a long time. It's going to be
many years.
Many years. Yeah. What's present here, of course, right now is this
150 years.
Yeah. So we've got this really very rare, very strong, very interesting Saturn Pluto, and it's in Capricorn. And one could say that Saturn is quite happy in Capricorn. Pluto likes to do its skullduggery in Capricorn, and we've already talked about an oligarchy, plutocracy, not only in this country, but strong-armed men around the world. It's a great time for dictators, and they have been on the rise since Pluto.
Well, we need to slow down for a second here, because you and I got rapid brains. Everybody's got to understand this is for the world here.
This is for the world.
Everybody in the world is going to have Saturn and Pluto together. And that doesn't mean that day. That means it's forming now.
It's forming now. They're both in that sign of
years. And as this gets closer and closer and closer, 2020, this is going to go on for at least 4 more years. But this is what this means in practicality is you better do the work. If you got a leak in your dam, you had better fix it now. That's what this means. There's no talking about this. If you've got climate change problems, you'd better fix it now. This is very real.
Yeah. It is, on some respects, life and death.
Yes.
But it's also like money and taxes, and the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, all by legislation. Again, back to law, back to the Saturn in the 12th house. It's all legislated. It's all legal. But it's another type of slavery. It's another type of theft.
Very well put.
Yeah. So, and I want you to understand, of course, what happens when Saturn conjuncts Pluto. It's very rare, of course, that it's going to be conjuncting it in Capricorn. But basically, Saturn and Pluto comes together every 33 to 35 years. And so we go back a bit. 1914. Saturn was conjunct Pluto. Does that ring a bell as far as
First war?
First World War. 1947 was the next time.
Second World War.
It was the Second World War after the war. And I'll tell you what, anybody who's done a bit more research after the war, you think that, 1945, there was a lot of peace. No, there was not a lot of peace. There was all kinds of aggression, revenge, Israel coming into its own at that point. Many other countries, India also having its tension between the Muslims and the Hindus. I mean, it was a very volatile time also, but coming out of the Second World War. Then we had 1982 was also when Saturn conjunct Pluto.
Trickle down.
Trickle down. That's right.
Trickle down into the rich people's pockets.
Reagan was president, and many of the things that we're taking a look at from the fallout, from the trickle down, from the Iran-Contra affair, and all of the stuff that was going on, and what the CIA was doing around the world, and which, by the way, created the blowback, which is what we found in 9/11. So all of those, I mean, again, it's always fascinating to take a look at these slow-moving transits and these conjunctions. I actually then had to go back to 1518 to find the last time that Saturn-Pluto was in Capricorn.
Really?
Yeah. So it's very rare when that happens. It was at 4 degrees, 4 degrees Capricorn. And this was when Martin Luther was making his rebel rouser thing.
Wow, that was big. It was big.
Basically, that was big.
Big.
Catholic Church had, somebody who said no more.
He was the Scorpio. Saturn. The Saturn was the church.
Exactly, right. And so it was like something had to break, because he was talking about the indulgences, which is like you pay to go to heaven and you pay the church. So again, a type of plutocracy again. So actually, this is some of the good news, because one could think that, my goodness, whenever you have the Saturn Pluto, I mean, the bad guys, the heavy guys, the money fellows, the mafia, they're going to win. But here, 1518, Luther comes up. And
that's one of the ballsiest things ever, really.
Really
ballsy.
This was the end of the Renaissance period.
Mm-hmm.
The way
he hammered all of his objections. He hammered his objections to the church doors. The timetables of history. Wow.
Timetables of history.
Fascinating. Wow.
A bunch of things. I've been playing with this book for years. And so I denote all the different alignments and junctions for all of these different times. And there was in 1517, still connected to this alignment, called the Evil May Day riots in London, when 60 rioters were hanged because, of course, they were protesting. This is when the big planets come in, and they're not very happy about things. I've already mentioned Martin Luther, but this was also when the Barbary states in Algiers and Tunis was founded, and then King Henry II of France was born, Charles V, the emperor, and all of this was happening. By the way, also happening at this time was, again, we have to take a look at different levels of these dynamics. Coffee was in Europe offered for the first time.
I think we're coming into a time with this Pluto Saturn when it's going to become, for the first time, a real story about, are we going to go global? Are we going to lower the borders and start talking about one country? It's going to become, probably won't come to pass, but it's going to become a major topic on the table, and it'll stay on the table. Because Saturn and Pluto, you got to think about those two. What do they want? I mean, Pluto wants to clear the way of anything that doesn't work, clear the way of anything that doesn't have any courage. And Saturn just wants to make things work. And I would think cryptocurrency, I would think that these two planets, when they get together, they're not going to listen very much to the other 8.
No,
I don't think they're. This is like the U.S. Russians having a little
exactly right. And they all have access codes to the nuclear rockets. So it can be explosive. And there's going to be those who are entrenched in their power.
Yeah.
And then those who are going to stand up and say, enough is enough. We have to have a people's revolution.
Well, then how do you explain when in any of these charts what this current, I wrote about this for years, what this current zoo we're going through now with the Trump and the clouds and the deception and the craziness. Where is that in the charts?
Well, how many depositions and the Mueller investigation these indictments. I mean, that's also Pluto digging into the political things, the dirty deeds going on behind the doors, the laundering of money, the illegal behind the scene things, and as well as some of the stuff that be called collusion, or that certain key people are being extorted. Pluto loves that sort of thing.
Yeah, but what's causing the cult behind him?
Oh, the cult. Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's got to be Neptune.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Neptune would be a prime indicator of all kinds of things that just kind of follows that. But you remember that I'm a hypnotist, and
I forgot actually.
Yeah, and so Pluto is on one side with a little bit of coercion, some manipulation, maybe a bit of bribery, and then you're going to do what I say, okay? and Neptune can think about possibilities, imagination, take a reverie, a guided meditation, and then you can be convinced through that, as well as through some interesting, convoluted religious precepts. You know, so there's many different ways that people can be manipulated or go along the way of popular movements and populism and so forth. And I believe that we've got both of these things going on. Those people who pretty much, they might hide behind religion, but they're not religious. They just want to take their piece of the pie, and the rest of you can just go fly a kite. We have a lot of those types. And as I said, they have been growing in power since Pluto has gone into Capricorn since 2008, who got the big bailout.
So Neptune is sitting on the progressed sun.
Exactly. It wasn't the people who perhaps lost their homes. It was the major banking companies and the mortgage companies.
Of course.
Deal that was for them, but very Pluto in Capricorn.
Well, this progressed sun about 2 years ago was back at 13. So we've had Neptune all over this. And just like I said in my recent article, Neptune's starting to move off of it. And people are starting to say, how'd we get here? How did this happen? How did these Mexicans get here? Huh? How'd that happen? That's exactly what happens when Neptune passes by.
Yeah, yeah.
You get your head out of the sand.
One of the indicators, by the way, of Trump becoming president, take a look up here in the 9th house, and you'll see that the progressed ascendant is now 3 degrees Leo. And when he was elected, it just went into Leo.
That's right.
Who's got the Leo rising amongst the possibilities that we could have chosen at that point? And, full of himself.
Mussolini rising.
Exactly, Mussolini rising. And so that sparks off, because it's Leo, it sparks the sun, and the sun in the natal chart over there making its eternal square to Saturn. Saturn in the natal chart. Right. And so, so when that progressed ascendant, indicating someone who has a strong ego, is, proud to say whatever he wants to say, that then sparked again that very old square against personality cult, let's say, in the 9th house. And again, one can even say that's a religion in the 9th house, making a square to Saturn, hiding behind the law, and then a particular group, a political party, was calling the shots for a long time. And that shows up again in the dualistic dynamic in this culture for ages.
And remember that the GOP just had their Neptune return.
Yeah. And
that's all you got to say about
really that. Dissolving, isn't it?
That was a year ago. Yeah, they've tried smoke and mirrors for a long time, and it worked. But now there's nothing left. So their last gasp, they grabbed on to Mr. Trump. And
exactly.
We're seeing how well that works.
Yeah. And not because of idealism, not because of even some very good Republican conservative
survival.
responsible perspectives, but for power, for pure power. This is how they're going to get their way.
Tell us something hopeful.
Well, that's why I mentioned the 1518 time and the rise of Martin Luther, because here we have not a person who, through his writings, through his preaching, it was again in Capricorn, and he was up against a very powerful monolithic power, which was the Catholic Church. And so I have some hope with that, because that then split off from the powers that be, because there's probably a lot of people believing that, oh, it's already set in stone, there's nothing I can do, it's a rigged game, the system is beyond us, my vote doesn't count. I mean, all of that, millions of Americans, not only Americans, but worldwide, lots of citizens around the world believe that, well, it's just beyond me, I can't do anything. But here we have the last time that it was in Capricorn. It was a person who really sparked off a major revolution that made a huge split in world history. So my feeling is that there are individuals, now of course in our modern world we have like, how many billions of people? 7 billion plus. So I don't think it's just going to be one person like a Martin Luther, but there's going to be thousands, there's going to be maybe millions of individuals with very strong voices that are going to say, the corruption has to stop. The emperor wears no clothes. We see the truth, and there's going to be a grassroots movement that I feel is going to be a counterbalance to the powers that be. Ginger, you should be pretty happy about that.
Yep. Yes, sir. You got a fourth chart, don't you?
I do. Yep. And that brings us then to, although this Pluto Saturn is going to be the setup here for the 2020 election, and that's going to be the presidential election. And I believe that things are stirring so strongly that Trump is not going to be one of the candidates in 2020.
Thank you very much.
Things really get heated up right after that when we have the Pluto return.
It sounds to me with Pluto Saturn, that kind of stern grounded energy sounds to me like the energies are leaning towards somebody older like Bernie, but that's just one guess.
Right. And then that would be a good hope. But he would be indeed a good example of that strong voice against, railing against the powers that be.
Well, what the last Virgo was LBJ that put all this stuff in place in '64. Old and gruff and cheating and cussing, but he did what was right for the people.
Yeah, he did all of his work behind the scenes.
There will be no peaceful transfer of power, Deborah said. I keep hearing that, but I do not believe that he's that powerful. I'm sorry. And I hope I'm right and you're wrong. I hope. Which chart would you like, sir?
Well, then the 2022.
2022.
Okay.
That's the
world bombing.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
We got the bombing thing done.
Well, yeah, we did. Let's go back.
Thank you.
3.
There it is. Okay.
Pluto return. In the birth chart, Pluto's here. It takes all these years to go all the way around, and here it's returning approximately.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be happening, of course, in the midterms after the very...
Oh, I'm sorry. This Pluto and that Pluto.
Exactly. It goes right exactly to where it was,
it looks off, but it's really the same degree.
It's the same degree.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about that.
And of course, in the progress chart, the Pluto's at 29. And so again, Pluto is going to have several years that it's going to be not only on its natal position, but also on the progressed position from basically 2022 to 2027. So
third house.
that's right. So very much like the Scorpio rising, the personality of the U.S., that really is kind of a tough cookie. I mean, it is the military might of the world. It takes our annual military budget is 10. It takes, I think, that the next 10 nations put their military budgets together to equal the growth. Okay,
and that's why you have no health insurance.
that's just one of the indicators of that. I think, okay, Scorpio rising nation wants to be tough, strong, and protected. You know, and Cancer, of course, with the outer shell, also would like to be protected. So we've got a double water dynamic going on there. But very much like the snake that molts its skin, there will be a transformation of the basic personality, the way that one perceives oneself.
Well, you know what? Let me interrupt you for a second. I'm sorry. Because that Pluto return, we have Scorpio rising.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a identity crisis. We're talking about a completely new USA.
Exactly.
This is happening now.
This could be the death of the old regime and the beginning of the new.
And the Constitution 2.0, I think.
That's it. Yeah.
Because the lawyers have found out the loopholes in 1.0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is coinciding also with that next Uranus return.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's going to be in 2027, 2028.
There they are, starting to form.
So you can see that in general, the 20s are just going to be so powerful that it's really time of revolution.
Oh my God. So we're going to be in our 80s, so we're going to be hobbling around. But
I'm going to be hitting people with my cane.
So Marcia, your daughter is going to be in her 50s, raising hell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which she ought to. Good.
So these, of course, are just a couple of different things pointing towards some very powerful stuff going on. By the way, I'd like to, as I see this here, truly we're talking about a change in consciousness. Take a look also in the 6th house, that progressed Venus now that we were looking at, that just a few years before that was talking about the Me Too movement as it was making that square with Pluto in the 3rd. Now it is opposing the progressed Saturn.
Oh boy.
And that's also 2022. This is again some more midterms. There's going to be some more movements going on. And again, the law is going to be renegotiated. Radical new legislation that hopefully, and I'm always an idealist here, Venus on a higher vibration wants to be fair. And it has been asking for that fair and just perspective as it's been making that square to Pluto in the 3rd house for the last several years. And so I think when it is in this position, making an opposition to Saturn, then we're just going to have to say again, okay, things have not been working out for everybody for a long time, so we have to right the wrong.
This is the house of the common man. I noticed that you don't play with Eris.
No. I've got enough stuff that's going to keep us.
I know, but she's qualified in my mind. She needs to be on the chart. Mm-hmm. Whenever you sneak up on her, she's raising hell. She's right about here now.
Mm-hmm.
Right on that ascendant. Right about. Yeah. She's the one that's doing the women's movement.
We'll take a look at the ninth house in the progressed chart, and the ascendant is at 4 degrees 40 in the ninth, right there. And so it is, this is of course set for 2022, but it has already gone past a square to that very same Saturn, progressed Saturn in the 12th. And so that's back to the 2020, 2022, and again, the progressed ascendant of the United States that kind of, brought in Mr. Huff and Puff there. It's now come to that point of a square to Saturn and say,
oh boy,
the buck stops here, and you cannot legally do things that you're doing.
Huff and Puff. Oh boy.
So very potent in many different ways. And as I said, this then can be coincided with these other things that I've talked about with the Uranus return, and that's in 2027. But I go back just a little bit, and I imagine everybody's familiar with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and the communist cycles.
No, I am not.
Oh, it's very interesting. That could be a whole subject right there. When Neptune was discovered in 1846, it was right next to Saturn.
Wow.
And what happened in 1846? But the Communist Manifesto.
Wow. That makes sense because that's Neptune, it breaks down all the barriers and everybody's one.
Exactly. The next time and it's every 36 years that they come together. And so the next time that they came together was in 1882, and that's when Karl Marx died, and that was one of the World Congresses of Communism. The next time it happened, 36 years later, was 1917.
When the war ended.
And the Russian Revolution.
That's right, 1917.
1917. What an interesting coincidence.
Fabulous.
The next time that they happened, 36 years later, 1953.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of commies were born in 1953.
I was close.
But basically, that was the death of Stalin.
Wow.
That was a major, major turning point for the Soviet Union. Then the next time that they came together was 1989. You're right, the Korean War was also during that time, fighting the communist Chinese at that point. 1989, that was the fall of the Soviet Union. The Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
That was so major.
Yeah, plus the wall been up for 28 years.
Yeah, 28 years. By the way, a slight step back, 1953 is when Vladimir Putin was born. And he would like to keep this thing going, I think, the good old days.
Oh, yeah.
And who was born in 1989, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And so the next time that Neptune and Saturn will conjunct will be in 2025.
Oh.
So that's close enough to 2024 election.
Mm-hmm.
So my vote is for Alexandria.
Well, I tell you what, this next election, no matter what's going to be born with the Saturn-Pluto traits. And those Saturn-Pluto traits will carry through all 4 years easily. Mm-hmm. So this person had better be tough.
Definitely. Yeah.
He's going to face very tough resistance.
Yeah. And we're talking already about the Green New Deal, which of course is a echo of FDR in 1930s, when a lot of the so-called communist or the Medicare, medical, Social Security, and all kinds of things here, getting away from having the capitalist plan our economy. They said the government has to step in when the government, when the business systems are not in our favor.
Socialism.
Yeah, socialism. Yeah, democratic socialism. Which, by the way, I've lived many years in Europe, and it's doing pretty well over there.
We don't want to listen to Europe. They don't know anything. We're America. We're America.
America.
We know America. We know what we're doing, don't we?
Yeah. So basically, the first major dynamic is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020, coming up next year. This is during the time when we're having all of these presidential hopefuls. They all have their messages, and we're going to be looking for those Martin Luther types who are going to have a contrary message that's going to take us away from the oligarchy. Then, right after that,
is that big, man? Is that big?
Big stuff. Yeah, big messages. But I'll tell you what, the old messages, let's keep it as it is. Let's keep the old system going, and let's give more money to the rich. That will certainly have its party. It'll have its advocates. There will be a lot of PR ads in their favor too. That's why we've got these two. Again, back to duality. We've got these two forces coming up very soon. It's getting hot.
I think there's a lot of validity to your chart having Mars and Gemini be the ruler. I do, or at least the co-ruler of the chart.
Co-ruler, definitely.
Yeah, that whole theme of going down two roads.
Exactly. Constantly. You know, and very high idealism with education, with technology, with innovations and things like that. And then at the same time, oppression, killing the natives, enslavement of people, and internationally with the policies, you know, intervention in countries with oil. Venezuela is now in the middle of that one. So there's just so many things I think that this chart can speak to.
Would you like to take some questions? We don't have any time limit. We're letting the tape run. Let it run as long as it wants.
Yeah.
If you want to do some final things, go ahead. But I do want to take some questions. So go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah. Well, I did want to bring it, back to this point where these alignments are happening, and the Pluto energy, taking a look at not only the plutocracy side of things, but also the revolutionary side of things, where there can be a transformation of society. And that is quite exciting. But then as we take a look at this very interesting Saturn-Neptune thing, which you can see from my really quick sharing, that it has that communistic or socialistic perspective. And the next wave of that, after the demise of the Soviet Union in '89, is going to be in 2025. But in 2024, just 1 year before that, there could be at that point someone with, again, a very kind of a Bernie vision. But at that point, he's probably not going to run. So there's going to be a younger advocate of something with more of a very fair perspective. You
mean like a Libra woman?
Work for everybody.
Like a Libra woman?
Like it could be that Libra woman, and those like her.
Well, there's several out there. And I tell you what, coming from a Scorpio, which you are, and I'm sure you're very good friends with Pluto. Pluto has so many sides to it. Through the years, I've become more and more favorable towards Pluto. When you're a young astrologer, it scares your pants off. You know,
that's
my
right.
God, there's Pluto, and it can certainly kick your butt. But what do you see? What I see is, and I've been writing about, the real difficulty with the country at the moment is, and I saw this in the Penguins chart too, at a smaller scale, the Pittsburgh Penguins. When you lose your mission statement, Pluto is not happy with you. And it really looks like we have turned our eyes from the Statue of Liberty. I'm sorry. I know it's overseas, but I cannot get the image out of my mind of the little boy that washed up on the beach. That's one of the most powerful images I've seen in my life since Vietnam, maybe.
Exactly.
But,
Yeah.
I think we're getting smacked across the face because we think we're so honorable and we're so open. And it is worrisome how quickly we've gone away from our mission statement. And I happen to think a lot of it falls in the lap of the Fox network.
Right. As well as
He went and said it, didn't he?
Pluto in the third house PR mechanism that is just going to keep on, firing. This is my my worldview, whether it's true or not. This is what I'm going to tell you. It's selling itself, and it has a devious side, I'd have to say, with the Scorpio.
Well, boy.
Yeah. So any other questions? I see that now.
Suzanne has her hand up. Please feel free. Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to ask Stephen a question. Suzanne, you're on.
Okay. I have a question. I'm glad to hear that there are some positive things that could occur in the near future. What about atonement? Is there anything in the USA's chart about, having reparations for the descendants of slaves and also atonement for the genocide that happened? I can't really see anybody going from one type of way or thinking into maybe a better way or a more spiritual way without some type of atonement happening. Like Germany did that after the Holocaust.
Indeed, yeah.
I think Saturn has something to do with atonement.
I believe that there's going to be probably some lip service about atonement in the U.S. The Sun in Cancer squaring Saturn in Libra in the 12th. They're just going to take care of themselves, and it's not going to be basically worth their while to give reparations and atonement. And also, unless there is a comeuppance with a Scorpio rising, there's not going to be a lot of apologies.
Well, I'm not talking about necessarily politicians. It could be grassroots, but maybe it could happen individually with each person in their own way. But there seems to be something missing from the core values. I'm American. I mean, I had my relative come over on the Mayflower. We've been over here for a long time. And so I can't, in my personal life, I'm looking at the country, but in my personal life, I can't proceed any further until I look at myself in a very real way and have some type of atonement before I can, so it's not just easy ways that the politician might come up with something, but internally, the soul of America, that's what I'm worried about, myself included.
One of the things you have to take a look at, being neutral, is the Sun is in Cancer, Mercury's in Cancer, Venus is in Cancer, the Sun is next to Jupiter, Mars is in Gemini. You have all these early energies. 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the 5 personal planets are in the first few signs. And unless you have direct connection to the outer planets, you don't think about others. You think about yourself. Thank God we've got Mercury opposite Pluto, which is tough, but it also makes you have to think about bigger things. So when we discovered Pluto, it helped in a lot of ways. Saturn is always on the back of the Sun, which I find to be very successful in most charts. But one of the things that hurts us is the Sun-Jupiter. The Sun-Jupiter, whenever you have too much of a Jupiter influence, you just go, oh, heck with it. Oh, it'll work out. It'll work out.
Yeah, optimism and that famous
blind optimism.
Can-do attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think we're facing that now. When you go to Europe and you look back at the U.S., I used to think there was a snobby thing to send the juniors abroad in college. It's a smart thing. You get over there and you look back at the U.S. and you see the U.S. is kind of going around with its lollipop and stuff. And you look at the Europeans and they've got these grave looks on their face, etched into their DNA. They know they can be taken over at any minute.
Yeah.
You can see it. You can see it. Their neighbors are right there. And us over here with Canada and Mexico, big oceans, and nobody can mess with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in that respect, also take a look at the person who's never been beaten, and pretty much most countries have been overtaken or conquered or beaten.
That's a good point. That's what's happening now.
Yeah,
that's what's happening now.
Yeah,
that's what 9/11 brought us.
Yeah, that
one guy.
Yeah, it's a black guy.
One Scorpio guy. One.
Yeah. And again, kind of like the 12th house cover up of that too, when majority of the hijackers were coming from Saudi Arabia. So let's go attack Iraq and Afghanistan.
What are your feelings on the 9/11 being valid?
Being what?
Valid. Did it really happen, or was it caused an internal job?
Yeah, that's. I think it's like a combination of things. I think when there might have been some people who kind of knew it was coming and say, I think if it were to happen, it could benefit us.
Trump thinking.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Like the Bush. Oh boy. But I can say that always rather suspicious to me was Building 7.
Yeah, it just came down. Oops.
It just came down. It wasn't hit. How long, this is my rhetorical question, how long does it take to set up a building for a demolition? They pulled it down within hours.
Oh, yeah.
And so on that very same day, and that's just the smoking gun as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Marcia, you're in New York. What's the feeling amongst you New Yorkers in terms of getting hit right in the face with it? I mean, do they feel it was an outside job or a government job?
That's a hard question to answer.
In general, what do the basic people, are they split on it?
It's a hard question to answer. I don't think I can answer that question because I was so frightened that fear just put a wall up. And I think a wall was put around many, many people from fear. So I don't have the answer to your question.
Well, that's a very honest answer. Thank you. Anybody else got a question for Stephen? Go ahead. Come on, Linda. I know you do. Come on. Come on, Linda.
Well, what I was wondering is, as we look ahead to 2020, what, as we imagine the leader that might be revolutionary rather than reactionary and plutocratic, what would that astrological profile look like for that moment? Like you were talking about how when Trump comes in, is that Leo movement. What's that energy going to look like?
You will my opinion, you will never guess it. The planets always outguess you. They're always outsmart you. Must shut up now.
They are definitely quite wily, those planets.
They really are. You think you got it? Oh,
but since Pluto is so strong, in the next few years, and even we think of Martin Luther, who was a Scorpio, so it's going to be someone who probably has a very strong Pluto or Scorpio dynamic in order to handle that kind of pressure.
Michael Moore.
And what it takes to really revolutionize some things, to transform some things. And so there's going to be someone who has to be very resolute, who's going to be able to be unflappable with a lot of pressure, because there will be a lot of pressure, because people, and especially the powers that be, they want to keep things as they are. Status quo, things are working for me. So it's going to have to be someone who is strong enough to say, I'm going to push forward anyway.
Nevertheless, she persisted.
We got several candidates, don't we?
Yeah, yeah. Now, taking a look at the progression, that Venus, as I had pointed out a couple times, going into Taurus at the same time that the transiting Uranus is also going into Taurus. And I feel like with a strong Taurus perspective, feet on the ground, let's have consideration for Mother Nature, Mother Earth, ecological, environmental concerns, and that mixed with this Pluto kind of toughness are going to be probably a winning combination in the next major, not only candidate, but people who can make a big difference coming up.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Very good point. Who's next? We got time for let's take two more.
Ginger.
Yeah, go ahead, Ginger. Your microphone is not on.
Better?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're on.
All right. First of all, I want to say this has been an absolutely enlightening and fascinating talk. And as you were talking, a lot of things from my personal life started coming up, and I promise, Rick, I'm just going to give you the cliff notes. I promise.
I didn't. Go all you want to.
All right.
It's just us girls here.
And what came up to me is that this night has been about the macro picture. What's happening to the United States? What's happening to the world? And some very personal things started coming up for me. For instance, I have an ancestor who was in the Continental Congress and is a signer of the Declaration of Independence. I'm also a descendant of Aaron's Burr. I had the Perrys who lost their fortune by starting an underground movement to end slavery, and they had a fortune and it was taken from them. I have a grandfather, David Karshner, who had something to do with Lincoln and slavery. I also have a grandmother I have two different Native American tribes all in this whole mix. This is all on one grandmother's line.
Wow.
Now, this is a very significant grandmother because when I was younger, she always told me that when I was in my 50s, starting about 53 years old, I was going to be a part of something bigger, and that everything I did in my life was going to be preparation up to that point. And when you were talking about the grassroots movement and how this is going to have to start as a grassroots movement, that's one of the things I've been called to do. There's a grassroots movement that I've been called to do, except I've kept it under wraps because it wasn't time yet, and I was working through. Pluto basically came in, kicked my butt, and made me get rid of any issues that would get in the way of this thing I'm supposed to do. And I'm just nicknamed February the Crucible is just my name for February. But I think that as individuals, we're all being called to take a look at what can we do as individuals? What is our role in the bigger picture? We've all got our crap that we've been going through and clearing out, and we've had all of these challenges and all of these lessons. And what I heard from your talk tonight is get ready. We're here. Get your diet cleaned up. Get your energy cleaned up. Get your personal finances cleaned up. Get your relationships cleared up. Get cleared up with anything that's going to keep you from being ready to do what you're supposed to do.
The one thing that's slipped between the cracks that I get all the time, because I'm living with an Aquarian. She's exactly right. It's the Aquarian energy. That's coming next after Capricorn. That's what it's going to take. That's the feeling of we have to work together.
Mm-hmm.
By me doing for you, I'm not losing, I'm actually gaining. That's what lacks in the Capricorn Cancer axis. I've done polls on people, and you wouldn't believe, but as far as people I've talked to with reasonable polls, the favorite signs in the zodiac are Gemini and Libra because they're very friendly people. And the least favorite are the Cancer Capricorns because they're cautious and they're realistic, but you got to get past the Capricorn energy, and that's what's going on now. We had to go through all this upturning of all the pus, of all the scum, of all the junk, all the crooks. Don't give him 25 years. Give him 47 months. He'll learn, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
but Aquarius is coming next, and that's when the instinct of idealism comes out. We want to put our arms around each other and work like a powerhouse together.
And we got to be able to bring our best self to this game.
That's a given.
Just work on it.
That's a given. I mean, human nature is that way if we just let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
We got to get so many institutions out of our way and so many liars off the television. Get them off these liars out of our face. What do you call the president? What'd you call him?
Oh.
Yeah, that was great.
Oh, we got time for one more question. That's our puffin stuff. I want to know something before I forget. How many people this week? I want to know this week how many people have gone around noticing people's eye sizes, and whether the lips turn up. Huh? It really. I keep learning and learning from it. It's true. It's amazing. I'm so glad I passed it on. Who has the last question? Don't be shy, Barbara. Who's got the last question? Going once. Come on, Linda, don't be shy. Going twice. Okay, we'll give it to Linda, number 3.
I was just saying you have a cat behind you.
I know, they're all over the place.
Mine have been fighting for the whole hour and a half I've been on listening to this. They're just driving me crazy.
Well, you know what you can do. You really can put up the clock on Solar Fire software, and you can watch the zodiac turn as the discussion happens. And as soon as that rising sign changes, the mood in the room will change. I used to show you that in class.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyhow, I'm not going to force you. Let's wrap it up here and give a special thanks to Mr. Poplin once again, whose website is transpersonal.us. Wonderful guest. It's his 3rd time, and I hope it's many, many more. And all I can say is I've learned enough tonight that I'm going to start playing with that particular U.S. birth time too. We thank you. I thank you very much for being with us, and you're welcome anytime as a guest and come in to sit down with us and shoot the breeze. And it's been very enlightening.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Give our best to your wife too. And
Okay.
tomorrow this will be the recording put up onto YouTube. It's number 117. So
Very
thank you, everybody. As I remember to tell you, in 3 weeks will be our time with Ted Spickler talking about climate. And in 6 weeks, we will be talking with Kathy Pagano about the women's movement again. Take care, everybody. Keep kicking butt and don't take any more lies. No more wooden nickels.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.